What's up, y'all? Damn, my phone is off. I think today is the 4th of June. 4th of June, 2014. My name is Luke Thomas. It's weekly MMA fight, or what, live chat on MMA fighting, whatever you want to call this thing. We'll do about 1.5 hours of your questions, comments, bitches, gripes, and smart-ass remarks. Best place to do that, of course, is on MMAfighting.com. This window you're watching, you can watch on YouTube, but it's going to be embedded on a post on MMA Fighting that, as I speak to you now live, is at the top of the site. So you can get all your questions there in the comments. There's a lot of questions today, so I'll probably spend the majority of my time in there. But we'll see. I'll also do some stuff on Twitter. You can follow me at SBN Luke Thomas, or you can email me luke.thomas@sbnation.com. Today, we'll talk, of course, about Jon Jones' situation with Daniel Cormier and Alexander Gustafsson and UFC President Dana White, and sort of what the power struggle that's going on there, what it all means, and where it all could end up. We'll do some speculation together. We'll talk about, let's see, there's the fight doubleheader we had last weekend. There's UFC Fight Night 42 on Saturday, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm getting my numbers right, which was Benson Henderson, Rustam Khabilov. That's the main event over in Albuquerque. That's a good one. Everyone's sleeping on John Dodson versus John Moraga. That's a good fight, too. I've got my cup of Coke Zero from Chipotle. I had their sofritas today, which is like their vegan option. It's not bad. Anyway, vegan options aside at Chipotle, those are always, you can contact me. The last thing I'd ask is, oh, I don't have my can. I'll do it with a bottle of water. Whenever you hear me crack open a container of liquid, there you go. That means you have to go, ooh, that means you have to tell someone on the bus, on Instagram, on Tumblr, on Twitter, on Facebook, that you're watching this and that they should watch that as well. Your participation and in sharing the news that we all watch this together is sort of required for its success. Also, shout outs to anyone on Reddit, on the MMA subreddit, who watches this. Okay, with that in mind, let's kick this bad boy off, shall we? First question that's up. Paul Daly, Semtex. Would you be for or against Paul Daly returning to the UFC? Dana has stated and made a good point that no fighter ever in the UFC has sucker punched their opponent after the fight has ended. It's intolerable, but lately I see fans warming up to the idea, myself included. What is your stance on it? Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I mean, it seems like it's a waste to me. Listen, if you have a code of conduct and you run an organization, be it Ultimate Fighting Championship or Apple or anything else, and you lose your job because you violated the code of conduct in such a way that it makes hiring you impossible again for principled reasons or any other kind of reason, then you have to sort of accept those consequences. I mean, UFC has a code of conduct, but I don't know that lifetime punishment is one of the things that goes with sucker punching. Maybe it is, but I don't believe so. Anyway, all those codes of conduct all the punishments are really interpretive. It's like how the brass feel the punishment should be levied. So in my case, you're certainly welterweight is a very strong division, but in terms of having headliners, in terms of building that UK market, it seems to me to make a lot of sense to get Paul Daly on the roster. He's done extraordinarily well in both kickboxing and MMA of late. I don't see why you wouldn't book him. But at the same time, if he's not booked, I mean, they passed on Ben Askren too, for different reasons, obviously, but I just mean in an age when they need headliners, and when they could use headliners in key markets they're really trying to make a strong push into, the UK being one of them. Paul Daly could be a real big boon to the company, but I don't know. Someone asked me if this didn't get enough recs, but I'd be happy to answer this. If I had a new job outside of MMA and I had to take into consideration that I wouldn't get pay-per-views or Fight Pass for free, which of these would I watch? Lawler versus Brown, DVR, McGregor versus Brandao. I'd pay for Fight Pass. because I'm enough of a hardcore fan to pay for it. Cerrone versus Miller. DVR. Team Edgar Penn. I catch it on Fight Pass later. Weidman Machida. I would watch that. Swanson Stevens. I'd probably watch that too. Tahuna Marquardt. Completely skip it. Johnson Baglatinov. I catch it on Fight Pass. UFC Fight Night. Henderson versus Khabilov. Might watch that. Tossing fighters out of the cage. That's a weird question. Is it possible? Crazy as it may sound, do you think it is possible for a fighter to toss his or her opponent over the octagon cage? It's not only possible, it almost happened. Tank Abbott almost did it years ago. But it's also a foul. Number one contender. If you beat the number one contender, do you become the number one contender? Obviously, I'm referencing towards Chael's statements. Do you see Chael jumping the queue and getting a title shot if he beats Vitor? Not necessarily. A lot of factors go into that. Could be the way you beat him. What if you get a split decision and it doesn't go that well? Even if you blow their brains out in the first round, maybe they say you got lucky. Even if it's a thorough beating, maybe you're coming off of Chael's situation aside, maybe you're coming off of 2 losses or a win and a loss. And, you've looked okay in them, but you're just not really in that space, and you come out and you have a great performance, and even if you beat the number one contender pillar or post, there may just not be enough momentum business-wise to validate that decision, or even from a meritorious side, there could be a number one contender, but what if that number 2 contender's resume is pretty close? I mean, you beat the number 1 guy, but you were number 7 or 8 in the queue, so hard to say. It'd make things complicated, but it would really depend on the factors. Was the person who won likable? Now, if you're talking about rankings, it's a little bit different. And I know let me clarify my statement. When I use number one contender, I'm sort of using the term a little bit more loosely, which is, number one contender is often what the general consensus is about who the top guy being. You can say what you want about those rankings. I don't really pay much attention to them. You would jump in the rankings a little bit, but I don't know that would make you the obvious guy from a business standpoint for a title shot. That decision becomes a little more complicated. How do you view a fight? What do you mean? What is the best way to view a fight for you? Do you concentrate on the fighter like you, or focus your eyes on them between the 2 fighters? The action's also fast. It's hard to see the shots land sometimes. I usually focus on the space in between, and then I'll take turns looking at each fighter. And I try to I'll watch the fights over again when I have the chance. I watched Mousasi versus Munoz again today. Question about Aldo. Aldo has recently voiced that he is not making enough money. Now it is 2 champions, one the former Barao, that have complained about their pay. Does it make a difference that it is the champions now? Yeah, I've talked a little. It is a fair question about fighter pay, but I've talked a lot about it. It is a bit different because they're champions. I mean, how do I talk about this issue without talking about it the same way I have before? With very little exception, my argument on fighter pay is the following. Fighters have not maximized their earning potential because very, very, very few of them exist in a space where they're able to contractually leverage for more, or leverage collectively in such a way to create baseline pay. Those are not really statements of debate. Those are kind of facts, basically. The question is how much that would raise pay. I don't know. As it relates to your question about Aldo and Barao, I certainly think it matters, but that they are speaking out. But what they're basically saying is we as champions and fighters feel underpaid. Well, they're probably right. They're probably not maximizing their earning potential. Question is, what would be the maximization of their earning potential? We don't really know the answer to that. Partly because we're operating a space and climate that I just described, partly because we don't have clear numbers on the financials of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. A lot of factors go into that. So there's nothing really new there. I think what you're talking about is do champions of the Ultimate Fighting Championship speaking out on this issue move the needle? I would say very little. I would say very little. For a couple of reasons. One, they don't speak the language, so it's harder to do press in the American media. Two, they're not really that big of stars. And three, the guys who are big stars, your Jones and your Rouseys, for example, probably get paid substantively quite a bit more. But that's my basic argument. Whenever any question of fighter pay comes up, the question is, should he be paid more? Is he paid enough? Here are the facts. The facts are, with very little exception, and we'll get to Jon Jones because that's a pretty clear exception, fighters are not really in a position to leverage for maximum earning potential and do not presently act in such a way to collectively use their might to get basic guarantees across the board. And as such, they are not making as much as they could be. The question we don't know the answer really to is how much more they could be making. I suspect in some cases it would be dramatically more. I suspect in some cases it wouldn't be marginally more. But that's my general argument for fighter pay. They simply don't earn as much as they could by virtue of the way in which the space is occupied. Whether you care about that is a separate issue. I care about it, but I recognize a lot of fans simply don't care if some of these guys live or die. All right. Here we go. All right, Jon Jones, finally, yes? UFC accountability regarding light heavyweight title matchmaking. I know a lot will be made about Jon Jones and his desire to fight someone over the other, but it seems to me we are only in this position because of the UFC. Okay, that's interesting. What do you mean? If Cormier gets to fight, that will be twice now UFC has said Gustafsson will fight for the title and then backtracked on their decision and snubbed him. What are your thoughts on this, and do you think UFC needs to stop jumping the gun and only make announcements when the fight is set in stone? I think blame is really the wrong word to use in any capacity here. So let's break the situation down, shall we? It's the most important one going on right now. Blame. What do we mean blame? We mean blame in the sense of wrongdoing. Somebody's been wronged. I don't know that anybody has been wronged, at least not officially. No party here has been wronged yet. You know, we'll see how it all ends up, obviously. But as I speak to you at this moment, no one's been wronged. I don't think blame should go anywhere. Not to the UFC, not to Jones, and certainly not to Gustafsson. Gustafsson, of anybody, is doing what he can, so I don't think any of us would go that way. But even the UFC, I don't think UFC deserves any blame. For what? They're trying to do what they think is best for their organization and their light heavyweight division, and maybe, frankly, what they think is also best for Jon Jones. John, we're reading the tea leaves out there, and we can kind of see that there's a lot of anticipation and interest around you rematching Gustafsson for all the reasons that everyone already knows about. We think that that's probably the best course of action. Certainly it's the best course of action for us in this light heavyweight division. Fills out our calendar in a way that we need, gets the right fight that we need. Hey, and John, we think, you know, I don't know if this is their actual argument, but I can guess that this isn't crazy to say that UFC might be thinking, and also, you know, John, you came off a great win at UFC 172. All the talk is about how you are pound for pound best. You know, close fight, you won it the last time, controversially or whatever you want to look at it, but you did win. But the interest is in the rematch, and you can make a lot of money, we can make a lot of money. Let's do business together. And frankly, if I'm being honest, I think that's a pretty fair argument. I don't really disagree much with that argument. I think that there's a lot of merit to it. But then there seems to be Jon Jones. Jon Jones has a different way of looking at it, which I don't quite understand. I don't mind him putting out those videos poking people in the eye, because at the end of the day, that's all he's doing is just, you know, giving you the finger, basically. But doesn't mean a whole lot, one way or the other. And I can see his point, too, you know. Jon Jones is like, well, hold on a second. I'm the one fighting in the cage. I get to have a say-so here. I'm one of your champions. You don't get to make decisions unilaterally for me. We get to make them in concert. I mean, after all, legally speaking, I am not an employee. I don't come in and punch the clock and report to my manager. I'm an independent contractor. So my work is done as a consequence of mutual agreement. Okay. And we are not mutually agreeing to anything. Here are the facts as I see them. I didn't train much for the Gustafsson fight. He took me a bit by surprise, but I won that fight. Look at most observers, they scored it for me. Look at most MMA media, they scored it for me. Ask Dana White how he scored it. He scored it for Jon. You may think that this fight was close. I don't really think the fight was close, but in the end, I don't particularly see a need for a rematch. In fact, what I'd like to do is take a guy that everyone also thinks is the guy to beat me. Everyone thought that Gustafsson was the guy to beat me, and I beat him. Everyone also seems to think that Daniel Cormier is the guy to beat me. In fact, they have said he's been promised a title shot. Now, a different position in the queue, but he's been promised a title shot. He's not. Jon Jones is not out there picking somebody. Jon Jones is not picking Phil Davis or Rumble Johnson. Great fighters, but not guys, in the title. He's picking guys that have been promised title shots. That's the reality. And for me, I've already beaten this guy. I don't really see the point in fighting him again. And I'm happy to fight a guy that everyone thinks deserves a shot at me and is undefeated and a former Strikeforce champion. You want me to face challenges? Here, we can face challenges. Now, you're asking me who's right. The answer is there's no such thing. There's really no such thing. It is true that we can have a general consensus about who the #1 guy is, the top choice. And I'd be lying if I said it wasn't Gustafsson now. I think we'd all agree Cormier deserves a title shot, but that I scored the fight for Jones, and I would be happy to see that rematch. It's true that the consensus, both from a management side, a media side, and a fan side, the people who generally work in this industry feel that the Gustafsson rematch is the most important one to make at this juncture. That it makes business sense, even better. But the truth is, we live in a world where might makes right. That's just the fact. That's the fact. You're just not accustomed to seeing guys in Jones's position use it. Neither am I, except maybe in boxing. And boxing, I'll admit, has guys use that to an almost toxic effect. Here's why I don't really worry too much about this situation. In the end, Jones is going to fight Gustafsson or Cormier. As a short-term solution, I'm happy with that. I would also say, and let me say as a qualifier there, if Jones were not picking Gustafsson, or excuse me, if Jones were reluctant to fight Gustafsson and not picking Cormier and picking somebody else, then we'd have a serious problem then. Then we'd have a serious problem. But my point being is, he is deciding he doesn't want to face one guy, but the substitute, frankly, might even be a tougher fight. Now, whether you want to see, we don't know that for sure, but it's at least that is at least an arguable position. He is arguably, not definitively, but arguably, picking a tougher fight. So for me, if that's going to be the case, I can't really cry over it. If he was picking somebody else in the queue, a Ryan Bader rematch or something like that, then we'd have some problems. Because then he is clearly moving away from a position of authenticity. Now you can't really say he's doing that. You can't. You can say that Gustafsson might have a stronger case for being positioned in the front of the queue, but you can't argue objectively that, you can't argue without a shadow of a doubt Gustafsson's a tougher fight than Cormier. That's a very difficult position to maintain. Not impossible, certainly, but it's not crazy. It's not crazy to say that Cormier is the tougher fight. So here's my point. In the end, what we are dealing with is a guy who understands the world in which we live. What you are accustomed to seeing, and God bless them because they make things work, is guys like Matt Hughes and Rich Franklin and Chuck Liddell, and to a lesser extent George St. Pierre. Guys who view themselves at the top of the food chain as partners with the Ultimate Fighting Championship and want to work in concert for mutual gain. And certainly Jon Jones, I think, on some level wants to do that too, But I think he sees himself as a bit outside that inner circle. That he's in that inner circle in some sense because he has to be. He's one of the top stars. He's a champion, sponsored by Gatorade, Nike, and all these things. So, like by virtue of his own stature and level, he's in this in rarefied air. But I don't think he feels a part of that group, embraced in that way. And you have to ask yourself, what did UFC 151 do to Jon Jones? You know, I don't think things have ever been repaired since then. And you can blame Jon Jones all you want for doing that. And maybe it was the smart call to just go ahead and fight Chael Sonnen and keep the train on the tracks. But when it didn't, and he got buried in public for it, and Greg Jackson got buried in public for it, however temporary the feelings of UFC brass may have been at the time, I still wonder to this day, would Jon Jones right now be as obstinate and difficult to work with if he had not been absolutely buried for declining to fight Chael Sonnen at UFC 151? We don't really know the answer to that. It's something I'm pondering, but it's worth examining. It's worth considering. It's worth taking into account. That why does Jon Jones feel the need to not to it's his legal right, but why does he feel the need to be a little bit more difficult to work with? And I'm guessing from what I can tell, what I've seen, what I've talked to him about, what I've heard others tell me in private and in public, I just think he feels like if he doesn't do what he feels is best for him, if he even gives an inch, then they're going to take a mile with him. And because they took an inch from him previously, he doesn't really feel the need to bend over backwards for them. I'd also add, though, that he's running a dangerous game here. It's one thing, I've been covering MMA in a more professional sense since 2007, but I had my own little blog starting, back in 04, 05, so it's been almost 10 years now. I've been doing this. Let me tell you something, man. I have seen a lot of fighters come and go. Here's what I mean. I've had my beef with fighters before. Some of it justified, some of it not. And the one thing I've learned is I'm going to be in this game probably a lot longer than they are. And there's a certain sort of comfort to that. The UFC is going to be in the game longer than Jon Jones. And he's riding high right now, and he holds the cards, and that's just the reality of it. Everyone has to accept it. They need Jon Jones to sign that thing, and he may need money and fights and stuff like that, but to move this operation forward at light heavyweight, they need Jon Jones. Or they could strip him, but that would be devastating for everybody. So no one really wants the nuclear option either. My point being is, what's going to happen to Jon Jones down the down the line when his career takes a bit of a slide? Now maybe he gets lucky and he does the Anderson Silva thing, and he basically is, as popular as can be, as important to the company as can be, right up until the point of retirement. In which case, maybe not. And let me be clear, I'm not even saying Zuffa's going to go out of their way to screw him. I don't mean that exactly. I just mean if you've had troubled relationships and strained relationships with your business partners for an extended period of time, how will that play itself out when your leveraging power is reduced? When theirs stays constant and yours is reduced. Does that mean they're going to seek retribution? No, of course, maybe, but they don't have to. It's not necessary, and maybe they probably won't even do it. But they may just begin to use their leverage over you again in a way that they probably wouldn't if there was more goodwill developed. This is what he's doing carries a risk. It carries a risk for sure. So you have to acknowledge that as well. Like, how much is poisoning future relationships? But this is the reality, folks. The reality is we live in a world where might makes right. And because of the context of what's happening, of Jones picking, and this, as we understand it, picking authenticity, maybe not the immediate one that we want, and I agree, I prefer the Gustafsson fight now, but he's not taking an easier fight. He's taking a different fight. And so as a consequence, there's really not much we can say about it. Certainly, I hope that the parties can work out a deal, but I don't think this started after UFC 172, of Jon Jones going like this. I don't think that's when this started, man. You really have to wonder what happened in the aftermath of UFC 151 changed the way he thought about his positioning in the company. You have to wonder. First MMA fight. New York Rick rubs me the wrong way. He's a good guy. He was supposed to have his first MMA fight. What happened? I don't know. Take it up with Rick. He's on Twitter. Jones being scared. Oh, I love these. Luke, does it also bother you when the fans will say Jones is a coward or scared for wanting Cormier instead of Gus? I mean, if there couldn't be anything dumber. Like, if you see anybody in person, online, I don't know, in print, saying that Jones is scared of Alexander Gustafsson, you know that person is basically, they just have, they just don't have a mammalian brain. I mean, there's not much to say beyond that, Nobody who thinks about issues like an adult thinks that. Flat. That's just a fact. And people are like, well, he's not scared of Gustafsson, he's scared of what might happen to him and get beat up again. Well, that's what being scared of somebody means. You're just removing his name. It's a difference without a distinction. Or excuse me, it's a distinction without a difference. So no, it's just the most ludicrous thing to say ever. Like, the only people who say that have no idea what MMA training is like. And have no idea what prize fighting is actually like at the level Jon Jones does it. You absolutely clueless. Absolutely clueless. It's the opposite. Now, Jones may be wrong. I may agree with you that I'd prefer to see the rematch. Let's establish that. But Jones isn't running from Gustafsson. He thinks it's insulting that you're even putting him in his space. It's got nothing to do with fear. It's everything to do with a sense of superiority. I'm not agreeing with it necessarily, but I'm just trying to tell you what it might mean. This idea that he's afraid is the height of idiocy. It is the height of idiocy. He may be wrong, and the Gustafsson fight may be the most important one to make. It may be the right one. It may be the one of consensus. It's not that he's running from Gustafsson. It's that he thinks that you think there should be a rematch is laughable. Because in his mind, and by all accounts, this is what I've learned behind the scenes, he barely trained that Gustafsson fight because he thought he was going to walk through that guy with no training. Now, that didn't happen, but he won in the end. And his point is, let me see, I won in the end, and when I train for these guys, they can't touch me. Why do I need to rematch him? I barely trained, and I beat him. So I'm not saying that that's the correct logic. I think that there is a case to be made for rematches, I favor Jones to win the rematch, but I'm in favor of a rematch. I'm with you. I think the rematch is the best fight to make. But this fantasy that Jones, arguably the best fighter in the world, the guy, the mountain from Game of Thrones, right, is somehow a person with insecurities so deep that he is afraid of physical contact and what damage may come his way over a guy he already beat. You are high if you think that. Put down the gasoline that you've been huffing, the glue, whatever it is, the cookies you bought in Denver. Like, let's please talk about this like adults. Luke Barnett versus Sean Strickland. This is from Fight Night 41. I disagreed with the decision, and it seemed to me like most fans disagree with it. However, the majority of the media opinion saw in favor of 29-28 Strickland. I would say that's fine. I think 30-27 Strickland, which is one of the scores he got, was, just not defensible. But as you may recall, I picked Strickland to win. Worst wave ever. Another question about Jon Jones, but doesn't ask it in a new way. Oh, this is my other favorite one about Jon Jones. Well, he wants to fight Cormier because Cormier is injured. You fools, this isn't a prison colony. They can't just yank him out of his bed or before surgery or 2 weeks after, we go, yep, get in the cage. If he fights Cormier, he's going to fight Cormier when Cormier is ready. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? This isn't indentured servitude. If they make the Cormier fight, they'll make it when Cormier has whatever medical attention and procedures that have to go into fixing whatever his ailments are. He rehabs, recovers, trains, and is ready. And not a minute before. Like, I just don't understand. Miller off McGregor. What do you think about the new matchup with Brandao versus McGregor? A puncher's chance to Brandao or an even fight? I actually think it's. I mean, listen. I would have preferred the Cole Miller fight. I think most of us would have preferred the Cole Miller fight for any number of reasons, not least of which I thought that Cole Miller was a good test for Conor McGregor. I actually think Diego Brandao is a good test for Conor McGregor, to be honest. You know, a flawed guy, an aggressive guy, but a guy who's pretty well-rounded everywhere. You know, not amazing anywhere, but he does have some decent wrestling. I mean, I called his fight in UWC against what was his name? Uriah Rodriguez. I can't pronounce his name. The guy who stopped the mugging in the Atlanta strip mall. And Rodriguez is basically, or Rodriguez, however you want to pronounce it, whatever, took him down for 3 rounds, and that's how he won. And his takedown defense, Brandao's, has improved dramatically. I think I spit on the camera. Has improved dramatically. Striking's a little bit wild, but he's very proactive. He bludgeons guys. I think a guy who's a bit more of a technician like McGregor is going to feast off that at some point, but I don't think he's ever had a guy like Brandao at this level sort of try and put it on him. So I think it's a good test for him. It's not the fight that it was, but you know, the Cole Miller fight had many things we liked about it. One of them was it was a grudge match, and 2, that it was the return of Conor McGregor and all these sort of different things. The Brandao fight, listen, it loses that grudge match angle, although I know those two have had words, but it's not going to be like the Cole Miller thing. Okay, fine. So it loses that angle. But it still kind of has, in a slightly different way, the property of being a good test for McGregor. You know? So in that sense, like, you know, am I, oh my God, I'm thrilled at the replacement? No, not necessarily, but it's a fair one. I think it's arguably the right one, given the alternatives. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I still want to see that one. Sure. There's another question about this later, so I'll give this one a brief answer, and then we'll come back to it as I get to the later question. Someone says, I used to be the fan that was shadowboxing pumped up for a UFC card. I used to watch all the fights from Facebook to prelims to the main card, and also all the tough shows. Recently, I find myself skipping tough seasons, the prelims, and even some small fight on the main card. What does that say? Is it because it was all new to me back then, or is it because there are too many fights? It depends how you want to look at that. Is it me or is it, well, partly recency effect always makes a difference, but the reality is there are more guys signed to the UFC than there are guys who fill rosters on NBA teams. Okay? There's more. Understand that. And basketball is much more ubiquitous worldwide. Sorry, it is. So just noodle that for a moment, right? Like, the reality is, I keep saying it, I don't understand why UFC. Listen, everyone's got their own way to watch fights, okay? And I've explained it. If you saw me in the MMA Hour, I don't want to repeat it again because we all disagree. You like fights a certain way. I like fights a certain way. For me, I like the UFC product that Bellator or World Series of Fighting cannot match. That's the way I like it. If you don't, fine, whatever. But the point being is, when you make an argument to your fans, if you don't like this one, skip it. That strategy is succeeding, at least with you. Okay. Jose Aldo is the only Brazilian or even non-North American on UFC's roster in terms of champions. Will this have a negative impact on UFC's presence in Brazil? I think we talked about this before, but certainly it's not great. But I'd be more concerned. I mean, it would hurt if you lost that too. Yes. I'd be more concerned, though, if there weren't enough Brazilian stars. And I don't think, at least at this current juncture, that I'm necessarily worried about that. Plus, you have to wonder how much of this is cyclical, you know. Was the amount of Americans and North Americans who hold this an overcorrection cyclical as well? You know, we'll see. We'll see. But Brazil produces a lot of talent in a lot of weight classes. That's one of the things that just makes it distinguishable from places like, even in its heyday, like Japan. Japan had a really narrow offering in terms of weight classes of guys who are really good in world class, and Brazil has none of those restrictions. They have guys from John Lineker all the way up to Junior Dos Santos. So at some point, I see this sort of ebbing and flowing. Well, that's a good question. I have long waited to watch a live UFC event. I live in Denmark, but I don't want it to be a European UFC event because those cards are very thin top to bottom. Where's the best place to watch a UFC event with a good card? Well, I would say to you, I would question that a little bit. There are two kinds of fights you always want to see as a fight fan. Okay? You want to see the big one. You know, you got to see the big one. And for that, Las Vegas is pretty hard to beat. I mean, Macau is a bigger gambling capital than Las Vegas, but it's like Macau is not the Las Vegas of East Asia in the way that Vegas is in terms of being sort of a fight hub. It's not even close. It's getting there. You know, they hosted the Manny Pacquiao fight, and UFC goes back there pretty continuously, but it's not even mainland China. You know, so in Vegas is in the desert, but it's this quote unquote oasis of adventure and fun. It's known as a destination, and it has a long-standing history in the United States as a place where major fights have taken place. So one, you got to go to the Vegas shows, you know, and not just any Vegas show, the right one, the real right one. Like 175 would be a great one to go to, you know. So that's one thing I'd say. But I actually, for example, I went to Mayweather Canelo. Like nothing will top that, you know. I mean, I'd rather go to a big MMA show, but in terms of big shows, you know, what tops that, dude? I mean, they had to turn people away from a sold-out weigh-ins. Like if you thought those Silva Sonnen weigh-ins for the rematch were big, there were 6,000 more people at Canelo versus Mayweather, and they had to turn people away for the weigh-ins. It was crazy, okay? I had good seats for everything, so nothing will top that. But at the same time, I actually like those little events a little bit more, and I'll tell you why. One, the venue is smaller, meaning even if you get a bad seat, it won't be as bad as it would be if you saw an event at, you know, Dallas Cowboys Stadium, okay? That might be fun to go to if you've got great seats and for the big show feel, but you know, you're going to be watching a lot of Jumbotron. Second thing I'd say is because it's smaller and because the guys on there may not be as good, or at least you're not going to get Anderson Silva on those kinds of cards. The price points are usually a little bit more affordable, you know. And because the arenas are smaller, people often say, "What are the best seats in the house?" Unless you have cage side or just outside cage side, floor seats are not that great. The best seats to get are ones that are eye level or slightly above eye level with the cage. Those are going to be by far your best views because you're not too far away and you're really at a perfect level to watch the fights. Because people stand up and it gets kind of crazy. That's really what's best, and those tickets are not crazy and affordable. I remember which one was it? I went to the one where it was the first time UFC went to the First Bank Center. It was the Kenny Florian Joe Lazan show, and Anthony Rumble Johnson fought Tommy Spear on it. Clay Guida fought on it. Carl Parisian fought on it. It was Maynard versus Edgar back when the UFC stacked cards. It was a great card. It was a great night. It was fun. It was inexpensive, all things being equal. It was great. I had a great time. I think those are the shows. And for example, UFC came here to Northern Virginia with Chan Sung Jung, Dustin Poirier. That event didn't even sell out, man. You could have gotten tickets the day of, and you would have been treated to one of those ridiculously good fights for a much lower price point in a venue with tighter, more intimate seating. Again, that will never be a substitute for the big show, but that's a great way to watch MMA. So I encourage people to go see Bellator. Now, this Bellator show on Friday is an absolute disaster. It's probably the worst card they've done since being on Spike TV, and I mean that. It's bad, okay? But Bellator can also do some pretty good shows when they go to Revel or when they go to, Hard Rock in Florida. They do some good shows down there. Check those shows out. They're inexpensive. You may see a couple of good fights. You get some decent seating, and it's just a way to keep up with MMA in a more intimate context that doesn't break the bank. At some point in your life, you're going to have to break that bank, and you're going to have to go to Las Vegas. But I would not discourage you from going to those smaller shows that can often be just as rewarding an experience in some ways. UFC using fans as pawns. What does that mean? Usually when the UFC is trying to arrange a fight, they don't say anything until the bout agreement is signed or very close to it. When someone from the press, a.k.a. Dana, about a fight, he smiles and asks who's telling you guys these things and plays blah, 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 blah. What's the question here? Oh, in terms of them releasing announcing the fight before it was signed? Yeah, it's called negotiation. It's their right to do it. So far, it's not looking too good for them, but that's the game that they play. It's the risk that they run, and this may backfire on Jones in the end. We'll see how it all plays out, but it's called negotiation. Again, might makes right. Jones's might versus UFC's, at least on this particular issue. Do I believe in other forms of martial arts? Not much. To the extent that there are judo, yes, karate a little bit, taekwondo a little bit. I don't know. True or false? Luke Rockhold gets a title shot within the next 12 months. Probably true. Jones fights Cormier and Gus before the next Super Bowl. That would be what? February? March? Something like that? February? January? February? Probably not. Jones fights Cormier and Gus before the next... Oh, sorry. UFC 200 is held in MSG. No. Dominic Cruz holds the bantamweight title again. Certainly would not rule it out. Bubba McDaniel becomes Bellator champion. False. Brad Pickett gets a featherweight title shot. Oh, excuse me, flyweight title shot. He might. Michael Page is a UFC fighter by the end of 2015. Doubt it. This didn't get wrecked, but I'll answer it quickly. Your man crush, who is Marcus Almeida Buchecha, three-peated in the Absolutes at Worlds. What do you think of his event overall? First person to three-peat. Absolute. And I think he got triple gold in his ultra heavy as well. At least he got double gold. He may have it's his third double gold, but third gold in his division. Bellator versus Affliction. Luke, many people, including yourself, have deemed Bellator's inaugural pay-per-view a massive success because it got 100K buys. However, if I recall correctly, Affliction also spent massive amounts of capital signing MMA superstars like Fedor and Tim Sylvia, much like what Bellator has done to Tito and Rampage, and getting 100K buys before ultimately going bankrupt. What has Bellator done differently to ensure it does not share a similar fate? Well, it depends. If they spend money at a continuous rate, they might. But I think the difference of what you're talking about is Affliction was basically not much of an organization. There was no real Affliction. I mean, there wasn't the T-shirt and vendor operating side of things, but there was no real organization. What you often find with MMA shows, large and small, it's just a guy with a bunch of money who may hire some third-party PR firms or a production company, and he wants to do a show. There's no there. And so what needs to happen is the live gate returns and the merchandising returns, and ultimately for Affliction, the pay-per-view returns have to be such that whatever money they put up front, they get back right away. That didn't happen. They spent a bunch of money up front to get a bunch of attention up front, and in some ways succeeded. But once there was no real way to recoup their investment, that was it. Like it went away. It wasn't a long-term play. At least it wasn't unless they got instant financial returns. So it was fun for fans. We got to see all that, but it had nothing to do with anything else. Number one, Bellator doesn't spend money like that. I mean, they may spend some money, but not like that. Two, they already have a corporate parent. Three, before they ever got into the pay-per-view space, they had a television deal, which is another way to generate revenue and boost the brand and create visibility and loyalty and all kinds of things. Now, whether that's succeeding in the ways that it should be is a different debate. And I'll grant you, I don't know that they made money on that 100K pay-per-view. I mean, they may have, but I don't know that they did, but the question is, with the ingredients in place, a much more affordable roster, space on television, channel to promote, with a history of promoting mixed martial arts, albeit in a different context and time, can they do more than 100K next time? If Alvarez had stayed on that card, could they have done 150? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe just 110, 115. I don't know. But that's what they're thinking. They're thinking, if we can boost this a little bit because of the more stable ingredients we have in place, can we keep this train going and boost revenue, boost profitability in this pay-per-view space? They did it in a much Bellator's existence in many ways, and it's changing over time. Like the Bellator, honestly, y'all, the Bellator that started on Spike TV is not the same one as it is today. It's changing. I'm telling you. It's really not the one on Fox Sports Regionals, for crying out loud. But the reality is the Bellator experience was created because for all of whatever criticisms you want to make of Bjorn Rebney or Bellator itself or whatever, they watched the IFLs and the Elite XCs and the Afflictions do what they did, and they said, that's not the way to do business. There must be a more stable, cost-efficient way to do this. And sometimes I think they go too far on the cost-efficient side, and even sometimes I think they go too far on the spending money side. But at least they have cost consideration built in. That's what's kept them alive this long. I mean, Bellator's been around since 2009. It's almost 5 years. How long did Elite XC last? Actually, that's a good question. I don't even know. I mean, Affliction was 3 events. IFL just burned through money. Hold on. Let's see. Okay, Elite XC held 11 events from 2007 to 2008. I mean, think about that. Think about that. Bellator's been around 5 years. You know, and you know, in a much smaller capacity than even what they are today. It's still, they're pretty far. I mean, they're hugely far away from UFC, but you get the idea. Like, there's longevity built into that game plan. There's stability. The question is, are those cost-cutting measures, are those ways to secure their future also ways to clamp it down? We'll find out. Do I compete in BJJ? No. Although if you do compete, you get better faster. I've seen it. When am I going to go compete? Like on Saturdays, I have a wife. I have to work at night. Oh, sorry, honey. And she does jiu-jitsu too, but what are you going to do? Oh, yes, I'm going to go to Ashburn, Virginia for the good fight. Submission, it's no time limit, submission only, sweet. So, you know, I don't know when I'm going to be done. And then come home exhausted and then stay up till 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning working. No, it's not going to work. Let's see. Already answered the question about Aldo and Barao. Do I think a Russian fighter will become a UFC champion in the near future? I certainly can't rule it out. Mark Munoz, after back-to-back first-round stoppage losses, where do you see this 36-year-old next? I'm not talking about retirement, but it seems more like mental problems to me than physical. See a top 10 middleweight to you right now, even though he's number 9 in the official rankings. I really don't think it's actually a mental thing. I just think Mark Munoz has had a tremendous athletic career when you go back to Oklahoma State, winning a national title at 197 pounds. He's a great. First of all, you ever talk to Mark Munoz, you cannot be a nicer guy. Like, and I mean that. A lot of these guys are jerks. Okay, it's just a fact. He is not one of them. He's a nice guy. He's had a tremendous athletic career. Had to change divisions. Got into MMA a little bit later than maybe he should have been, but he got in nonetheless. And I think now he might be in that transition phase in his life, because he's got Reign MMA, he's coaching guys, women and men. He's 36. not everyone's athletic career lasts forever. I'm not saying it's done tomorrow, but certainly I think it's in the twilight. I think this is probably it's certainly closer to the end than it is the beginning. So I don't know if we can really write him off, but I don't think it's a skill thing. I don't think it's a mental thing. I think he's got skills to some extent. I mean, I don't know if he's he's not Anderson Silva good, but he's got skills to be a competitive guy, and I think he's a physical brute. But it would be different if he was 26 versus 36. He's got a lot of miles on him, and when you watch that Mousasi fight, he just didn't have really good setups to his takedowns, and when he got on the legs, he just didn't have a lot, which has been a problem for him. For a guy who was a great wrestler, I always thought that if there was one criticism to make, and I didn't win any titles at Oklahoma State, but he was never really blowing through guys. Maybe a little bit in the Boach fight, but with the Okami fight, it was like he would penetration step onto them versus through them. And I just feel like that was the same thing we saw with Mousasi. So we'll see. What do you think about the European commentators? Dan Hardy and his crew. Love them. Think they're great. Think Dan Hardy is a natural. Happy to see that he's doing it. I really like it a lot. I like Fight Pass now a lot more than I used to. When they first rolled it out, there just was nothing to criticize, really. I mean, there was hardly anything there. These days, I'm kind of liking Fight Pass a little bit. Now, I don't know that I would be siphoning off as many shows as they do, and you guys know I think less is more, but as a service, like a theoretical service, and partly in part of what they're delivering, I'm liking it more and more. I like those guys a lot. I have a lot of respect for what they do. UFC 175. True or false? Vitor Belfort will get licensed in Nevada. Boy, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? I'm going to say no. Belfort will finish Sonnen in the first round. If they do fight, probably. Davis will make it out of the first round against Rousey. Probably. Machida versus Weidman will take place mostly on the feet. True. Weidman will submit Machida. Also true. UFC 175 will get more pay-per-view buys than Canelo versus Lara. Ooh, that's a good one. I will say yes. I will say yes. But Canelo versus Erislandy Lara is a beast of a fight. So is Martinez versus Cotto. Froch versus Groves 2, the rematch. Did y'all see that right hand? I think it was a right hand, right? That he put on Groves. Whoa. Whoa. It was the Mountain versus, what's his face? Red Sniper, is that his name? Oh my God, man. That was brutal. That was brutal. Luke, what would your walkout song be and why? Don't pretend like you haven't thought about it. I think all of us have probably at some point or another imagined the situation. I don't know that I have one, though. There's nothing that stands out to me that would be important, but it definitely would not be metal or nu metal. And I like some forms of metal, but it would not be. It probably wouldn't be hip hop either. I don't know what it would be. Maybe Aguanile by Hector Lavoe. Yeah, that's probably what it would be. Or this is kind of like rap. It might be. Hold on, I can't remember the name of it. Hold on, I got my Spotify up here. This one, can y'all hear it? Atrévete. That song is dope. Atrévete. Anyway, let's go to the next one. September 5th. Luke, what do you think about the ratings will look like for Bellator and UFC head-to-head? Don't know, and I need to talk to somebody in both organizations about that. It really depends on what the cards are going to look like. Do I think Bellator could beat UFC in the ratings? Yes, because of the nature of how Spike is bigger than Fox Sports 1, but I could also see it the reverse, particularly how they stack the card and promote it. So man, it's tough. It's tough to say. I don't know. And then they're splitting the audience. Although the difference is though, here's what folks don't realize. Let's say that a Bellator show and a UFC show pulls 700,000 people on average as their viewership, right? The UFC show will do more traffic for us. Not hugely more, but typically more. And that's because I don't know this to be sure, but I think that, Spike does a lot more than MMA. They have, Bar Rescue and Ink Master and Cops, which is a huge rating success for them. I think they get a lot more people who are maybe destination Spike viewers that will just watch MMA who aren't necessarily hardcore MMA fans, whereas UFC is getting that dedicated group. Ben Askren, did I see his fight in ONE FC? I did. Everything that was supposed to happen did. Do you think he'll ever step in a UFC cage? Probably not, but might makes right. Let's see. What's the best way to learn and train jiu-jitsu? Some gyms do the same thing over and over again. A warm-up in 20 minutes, showing a technique or two, and then sparring. Do you think slow rolling and a lot of drills are important as well? Like Galvao and Mendez brothers really drill a lot. Yeah, it's kind of, there's all different kinds of theories. Like Andre Galvao has a book like Drill to Win. He really believes in drilling and also doing all kinds of extra conditioning. Marcelo Garcia, he likes drilling a lot, but is a bit concepts-based, and him personally doesn't do anything else besides jiu-jitsu to get ready for tournaments. So it's what everyone really feels the best for themselves. I like watching YouTube videos and then trying stuff out in drilling classes. Like, so going on Sundays when there's no class and going to open mat and finding people. That's really important. And then showing up as often as possible, get as many techniques as possible. Staying after class, practicing them some more. You just got to make them a part of your repertoire. And also the school. Like, if the school's like, hey, we're going to learn the Kimura sweep today. Hey, we're going to learn guard pulling the next day. Hey, we're going to learn, taking it back from turtle guard or something crazy. Then you're not really getting the sort of consistency you need across the techniques. You're just sort of picking at random, and that doesn't really help your development. Luke, I want you to pretend for a second that you're Dana White, all right? Gustafsson wants a rematch with Jon Jones. Jon Jones wants to fight Cormier. And the fans are split in between the two options. What fight are you going to make first and why? It's either Jon Jones versus Cormier or the rematch between Jones and Alexander Gustafsson. For me, I would make everything possible to make sure that the Gustafsson fight happened first, and if it didn't, if we had to go with Cormier, I would want some other concessions down the line. That's sort of what I'm hoping we can get. Because, like, everyone was, like, saying, well, there's nothing's going to happen here. Either Jones is going to get his way or nothing's going to, there's going to be no forward progress. I'm not so sure I believe that, I sort of tend to believe that Jones is going to get what he wants maybe in the short run, but that I just don't see any way UFC is going to let themselves get leveraged like that. They may agree to like make this fight happen, otherwise, who knows what's going to happen. But that we'll make this now, but down the line you need to make some concessions. That would be my instinct. Okay, we'll give you Cormier first, fine. It's a really tough fight, one we can sell, but we need something from you down the line. And whatever that may be, we pick your next fight. You beat Cormier, you have to face Gustafsson, no doubt about it. It just has to be the way you do things. We'll see. Because here's my thing: if he beats Cormier and then doesn't fight Gus after that, we got a problem. I would agree with after that because there's no clear contender after that. Like, we got a problem. How do you see Canelo Lara going? I don't know, man. I don't know. I could see Canelo getting boxed up early and then his power taking over late if he doesn't fade, but sometimes he fades. It's a tough fight for Canelo. What does the Golden Boy shakeup mean for boxing? Kevin Iola's got that covered. I won't cover it here. Michelle Nicolini, in her finals match at the Worlds against Tammy Munoz, she snapped her opponent's arm. In spite of this, her opponent kept fighting and eventually lost. Although this was in BJJ, this type of thing happens in MMA as well. Do you feel the refs should be allowed to call off fights after a fracture to prevent further injury? Yes, because they are not allowed to do that. They can only do that if the person goes unconscious or taps. If the person is damaged like that but does not tap and is conscious, they can't intervene, which I think is kind of crazy. Now, by the way, I want some credit. Follow me here. I was tethering off my phone on an Amtrak train from D.C. to New York City because I had to be in New York for the next day for the MMA hour, right? I was watching this off my phone to my laptop, so the connection was a little shaky. I could be wrong about this. I was the only MMA journalist who watched that live and was tweeting about it. Now, I know that's a very hipster thing to say, but I want my hipster cred. I was the one who told everyone about this because I was watching it going, oh my effing God. I've never seen it. That is the nastiest armbar I have ever seen. I've never seen arm bars worse than that, man. I've seen so many arms break. Yes, I've seen Mir and Sylvia, and I saw the one where Forrest Griffin broke his arm in Brazil and kept fighting through it. I've seen broken arms in jiu-jitsu tournaments. I have never seen one get pulled like that. And for Tammy Munoz to not tap, what a G! What a G! She is a beast of a person. But I do think that the IBJJF, there's a few rules, man, that IBJJF needs to implement. Everyone's like, dude, I've lost matches before, and then the last second, for a 20-minute match, I caught some random wrist lock and I won, but I was down, 30 points to 2. Sorry, man. There needs to be tech falls in jiu-jitsu. At least at the Worlds of the Pan Ams and the Brasileiros, the 4 major ones: Euros, Brasileiros, Pans, and Euros, Brasileiros, Pans, and Worlds. Those 4, they need to be tech falls for those. Meow Brothers were going up 25-4 on people. Man, there's tech falls in wrestling. You surrender that many points to a guy? Come on, man. Let's just call this a day. We're in a tournament. Let's hustle this thing along. Number 1, there should be tech falls. Number 2, stalling should be called with way more penalty than it is right now. They should take points off your score, not add points to the penalty side of the box, which is what they do. If you look at their jiu-jitsu scores, there's points, advantages, and penalties. You can have penalties if you want. If you get 2 stalling calls, then you should lose a point, or your opponent gets a point. That's what they should do, because that would change things pretty dynamically. And 3, the one you're talking about. If someone gets their S broken, I mean, I understand someone not tapping. If they can break it and conceal it, that's fine. But this was such an obvious, horrible bad break, or at least dislocation anyway, that the ref should have been able to intervene. And Tammy lost anyway. But if you're asking why she didn't tap, for those of you who are just now seeing this or whatever, Michelle Nicolini is like a multiple-time world champion. There was a minute left in the match, more or less, and Michelle was losing. And Michelle's headed to Legacy FC to go compete in MMA. She had fought Mackenzie Dern at Metamorphs 2, I believe, or competed against Mackenzie Dern anyway. And for Tammy to be there, first time, this is your whole life, man. You're at the black belt level. This is your whole life. You may never get to that podium ever again. You may never get to that black belt finals ever again. So, I would have tapped because I'm just not that kind of person. I just do jiu-jitsu for fun and, because it's interesting to me. But, if someone championships and you're about to beat someone who's a multiple-time world champion, all you have to do is just hang on. I can see why she wouldn't tap, but you got to mentally intervene at some point. Do you think Diego Sanchez will be on the chopping block with a bad loss? No chance. Thoughts on Renzo Grace's incident? I haven't paid a lick of attention to it. I could not possibly care less. How much do you think Jones is making a fight? $2 million? Probably slightly less than that. It's fight week. It is fight. It's never not fight week. Cormier being the tougher fight. We don't know that Cormier is a tougher fight, but it's my only point is, with the information that we have, that is at least an arguable position. If someone tried to argue, I think Cormier is the tougher fight, that is an opinion that may not be right in the end, although it also could be right. But at a minimum, it's defensible. Which country has the third best talent? Canada, right? Are you ready for 3 more double headers? As long as I only have to do what I did in the last one, it doesn't bother me. Rise of European MMA. Luke, do you agree that there seems to be a noticeable rise of talented European fighters? Consequently, do you foresee the UFC holding a lot more events in Europe in the next couple of years? Yes and yes. There's always been a bit of a groundswell there. I think the UK market will see. I don't have a strong feeling. I don't have a strong feeling about how the upside and growth of UK. It could be tremendous, could be sort of flatlining still. I just don't know. But it's not just MMA growing there. Jiu-Jitsu is growing there as well too. Like combat sports of the kind we are accustomed, absent wrestling, are growing there. They're becoming more popular there. So I don't know how far away we are from them having a bunch of world-class guys, but more, say double what they have today. But it's certainly on the move. We'll see. I don't know. Live chat video not in the video section on MMA fighting. Luke, don't you think your live chats would be get some more views? Should put them in the video section. Yeah, maybe I should. I'll talk to my boss about it. Can you give us a breakdown of Benson Khabilov? Yes, and if someone points out, I'll put that in my prediction stuff, which will come out, I think, tomorrow, maybe Friday. Okay. Good question. Here we go. Could you closely review the technique used when Gegard reverse position mid-slam against Munoz? I'm assuming you're referring to the very end of that fight. It was incredible to see. His grappling is very slick and smooth. Been a Gegard fan for years. Recently read that he invests all the money he makes into real estate and currently owns 11 buildings. He's a very different kind of fighter in and out of the ring. Yeah. So what did Munoz do? He had double underhooks and was pressing Mousasi against the fence. What he was trying to do was try to create for a lift and then turn and drop. That's what he was trying to do. But if you notice, there was a major takedown at the beginning of that round too. The two defenses were not really dissimilar. They were not dissimilar. Here's what I mean. And the first slam, that big slam that Munoz had, and he came down. Watch Watch the hips of Mousasi and his left elbow. If you notice, when he's coming down, he kind of posts on his hand a little bit, which you shouldn't do because you can break it, but he eventually lets it give way to his elbow. In jiu-jitsu and in wrestling, anywhere, really, what's the worst place you could be? Maybe someone on your back, but if that's not the worst, the second worst is being flat on your back. Terrible. You can't be flat on your back because you have no space to go backwards, and you can't sit up because someone's on top of you. So you're basically stuck. You have to get to a hip, right? You have to get to a hip. And one of the ways you can get to a hip is you can just sort of lean over. And once you get to a hip, to then change the angle of what's possible, because if you can post off your left foot and then your right hand, you can swing your weight out. So here's my point. When Munoz slams Mousasi, notice he never lets his elbow get underneath him. His elbow always stays up. And because he's twisting, because he can post off that elbow, and because he was sort of ready for it, he's able to twist his hips to get them flat to the mat. And because they were flat to the mat, he couldn't get rolled over. That was how he stopped that takedown. He kind of waited and waited, and he watched how he was getting put down, which is sort of a ballsy thing, and then make sure he got on an elbow the whole time and put his hips flat. Whenever you finish a takedown, you want your hips flat. Look at anybody who scores a takedown every time. If they successfully secure it, their hips are flat. By virtue, if my hips are flat, you can't roll me over to my back, which is exactly what he did. The second one was basically the same thing. I mean, it was slightly, different variations. Here's Munoz, double underhooks, right? I mean, he had doubles with the slam too, really, although different parts of the body. So the mechanics changed a little bit. But what happened was he tries to turn him. Munoz tries to turn Mousasi, pick him up, create space, and then turn him. And he couldn't quite do it because, first of all, Mousasi's balance is amazing, number one. But what winds up happening is he still gets both feet on the mat. And as that happens, you notice that Munoz still has both hands clasped together, right? So he has nothing else to base himself off of except his knees and his feet. And he was on his knees by the time the first attempt at the slam didn't work. So the other portion of that is that Mousasi had his hips back, right? He wasn't. When you take down someone, what has to happen? You can have your hands either really up high or really down low. You don't want them in the middle. You want them around their waist. You want to suck their hips into you, or you want them up top so you can control the shoulders and the line of the shoulders. That's what you want. And he didn't quite have that. And so what happened was, as Munoz started to turn, to stand, to turn, Mousasi used his own momentum. But so like for example, one thing you could do is I shoot a double. You stop it. As I stand up, you'll see a lot of judokas then throw. Well, why? Because as I'm standing, I'm giving you everything you need to lift and turn. Similar to that, as Munoz is standing, Mousasi is able to simply step over. He's able to step over. He has his hips behind him. I believe he had a whizzer as well, so he can just lift and step, and he came right over. But the trick to that is it's not some amazing go-go plata, right? Where it's you need limber techniques and you have to like contort your body in a certain way. It's not that. What Mousasi demonstrated was strong fundamentals and more than anything, also good balance, great balance, but more than anything, timing. The timing of that was excellent because he had to step over before Munoz had recaptured his full strength underneath his feet, but while he was coming off in that half beat, and then turn him, and then turn him. That was what made it so great. It wasn't any particular like super esoteric, let me show you this grip sequence that no, it wasn't that at all. It was strong fundamentals, great balance, and more than anything, excellent timing. MMA journalists suck. Okay. A lot of the time you comment about how a lot of the MMA media is subpar. We always discuss what it will take to get the sport or the UFC to the next level. Do you think it will take for the what do you think it will take for the media coverage to not only expand but improve in quality as well? Money. Simple as that. Money to recruit, money to do the kind of stuff we want to do, money to pay more people to do the kind of work necessary. Money. And where does that money come from? Well, so think about that. Bellator 121 is the worst card I've ever seen from Bellator, at least since the modern era. Luke, why is Bellator headlining a card in 2014 with James Thompson, same guy that Kimbo sliced, defeated, and smashed and bloodied? It's, again, I've talked about this, I know there's some disagreements over whether there is oversaturation. Some fans don't think there is. But let's take for granted at least there's a little bit. Bellator should not be contributing to that problem. They need to do fewer shows. I mean, this is madness. There's just really, an organization this, listen, Bellator is not UFC, but it's been around for 5 years now. For an organization this good and this tenured, it's okay to say you can demand more from them. I'm not going to go out of my way to club them about it because it's just so obviously. It's just not even worth talking about, honestly. I don't even want to bash it more than I just let's never speak of it again. McGregor, I was really looking forward to seeing McGregor. Blah 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 blah. I don't know. Anderson Silva, thoughts on a possible comeback fight with Nick Diaz in 2015? I'm not a religious man. I think when you die, you just rot in the ground. I I don't really know what happens after you die, but I'm fairly certain that there's no heaven, at least not one that we imagine it to be. But if there is a God, he will make Anderson Silva versus Nick Diaz in 2015. If that fight is made, I will join the monastery. You know what I mean? People are asking, in between fights, like an actual event, why don't they do more to hype the next fight or show highlights and whatever? I think it's because when they show you an event, they want to hype the next one, but they don't want to contribute to overload, where you're watching so many different things going on that you can't really keep track of what's what. And if you bought a card as a casual fan to see Anderson Silva, you don't probably mind seeing ads for future things, but that would be a case where less is more. That's a case where I actually agree with the UFC pulling back the reins a little bit. Still haven't heard about Bellator 120 attendance gate and fighter salaries. I cannot get the commission to return my request for correspondence. I'll just say it plainly. Called, texted, emailed. Can't get a response, and I don't know what else to do. So I'm going to keep trying, but that's the truth. I am having a hard time getting a call back. And don't think that I'm the only one. Don't think it's because we're not trying. Believe me, we're trying. True or false? Diego Sanchez retires after a UFC Fight Night 42 in Albuquerque. False. Although crazier things have happened. Johnson versus Bagalutinov, UFC 174 outsells Barral versus Dillashaw. False. Tito fights for the title this year in Bellator. Oof. I'll say true. Ronda Rousey eventually joins WWE. False. Askren returns to Bellator. False. Nick and Nate Diaz never fight in the UFC again. False. Anderson Silva returns to the UFC as a light heavyweight. Maybe for one fight. Jon Jones loses to Daniel Cormier. I'll say no, but that could be true. If Vitor gets approved to fight after a failed test, let's assume it's a failed test, only 4 months ago, how do we look at NSAC from then on? Same way you look at him now. What would change? Are they're riding into this with some huge wave of authenticity and legitimacy? This is a good question and one I did a lot of thinking about. The doubleheader of May 31st. Luke, the more time passes since this Saturday, the more I can't shake the notion that we were given 22 UFC fights to watch. We didn't learn much of anything at all from them. Mousasi beat a fallible and overrated Munoz. That's a slightly harsh way of putting it. But Maya reminded us how boring he can be when he's fighting light competition. Barnett couldn't convince 3 judges to pick him despite moving forward for 15 minutes. And Francis Carmon is officially done as a middleweight prospect after losing to someone who also isn't a middleweight prospect. I can accept that sports provide an entertainment factor and that entertainment is often enough, but stakes are necessary here too. What do we learn? Well, it wouldn't be fair to say we learned nothing. I think, first of all, you have to say you learned a few things. I thought Mousasi looked really good. You can say what you want about Munoz, but even the way he dispatched Munoz, he had just a lot of strong fundamentals that I thought were important to recognize. That's one. And then I think more than that, though, this is my issue. And again, it goes back to your palate, your tastes. For me, I wrote about this when I said T.J. Dillashaw rewrites the universe. That was an article I read. Like if you walk into a UFC event, a major pay-per-view, say UFC 175, and you have certain theories about Chris Weidman, you have certain theories about, or hypotheses, I should say, about Lyoto Machida and Rousey and Davis and so forth, and then it all plays out, and then much of that often changes what you thought or what you thought to be true. And in the case of Dillashaw and Barral, the result was so dramatic that you had to go back and not only sort of think about what had happened just now, but man, what did that mean about Dillashaw beating Mike Easton looked, I guess, not so bad in retrospect. And then you have, what would that mean for Dominic Cruz? And now, all kinds of questions go, and the way in which you understood MMA changes afterwards. Like that, he really didn't. He didn't rewrite the universe. It's a bit of a, the hair is the headline is made for dramatic flair, but you get the idea. The problem with those events for me, I cannot speak for you. I can only speak for me. The problem with those events was not that they didn't have an entertaining fight or two, or that they didn't provide some value in the market, but everyone always talks like, why do we always talk like we work in the Bellator front office, or the UFC front office, or the World Series of Fighting front office? We only ever talk about it like what it means for the business. Like what is it in terms of their interests? And as long as it makes sense for their interests, well, then we should just sort of take it. I never really understood that. Don't we all have bigger ideas than that? Don't you all think a little bit more outside of what makes sense for them and maybe what makes sense for your own individual needs as a consumer? Understanding your own individual needs as a consumer, are going to have a limited effect, but aren't you supposed to be honest with what you like and what you don't like? So for me, I understand the Brazil event was heavily hampered by injuries, but injuries is part of what happens in fight sports booking. You're not going to get every fight you want, and that's sort of occupational hazard. And for me, it's I can't wait for 175, especially for the top 3 fights, and I hope they can make Son versus Vitor, I suppose. But and for example, I think the Fight Night card this weekend, the main card, the prelim card is dreadful, but the main card, it's got some really interesting fights on it, and I think that deserves to be noted. But last weekend's fights was all a bunch of white noise. Couple of moments that were great here and there. It was a lot of white noise. It was just wallflower content. It was very much forgettable, And for me, again, I'll say it as I said on the MMA beat, and I'll say it forever. UFC is the best organization by a million miles. They do things that no one else can do, literally. And if they wanted to, every year they could, I bet you, make every single. If they wanted to, they could make every single event better than anything anybody in the competition could make. They have that ability. And I don't want to watch UFC to watch stuff that is commensurate with the level of, even maybe it's high-level Bellator, but Bellator. I don't want to watch UFC to watch stuff that's maybe commensurate with high-level World Series of Fighting, but World Series of Fighting. I like to watch the stuff that UFC does that people can't touch. UFC has created a product when they want to put it out that people cannot touch. And I understand all the business considerations. Nothing any of you tell me about that is news to me. I cover this for a living. I get it. But I'm also a consumer too. We pay for. I would pay for Fight Pass. I truly, honestly would. I've been paying for pay-per-view since, with limited exception, since 03, 04, maybe no 02 even, to some extent. Anyway. You get the idea. Everyone always talks like, well, no, Luke, you don't get to have an opinion here because this is what the business strategy is for UFC. And so as long as it sort of in this very narrow world makes sense for them, they're trying to open up Brazil and they had the answer to Globo and it did well in Brazil. I don't care about any of that stuff. I'm a consumer. I'm allowed to have an opinion outside of what makes sense for the promoter. I want things that make sense for me. And for me, given how much MMA I've watched and how much I've learned about it and how much I enjoy, watching guys who are number 50 in the world ranked at the highest level show makes 0 sense to me as a consumer. 0. I believe that those guys should be fighting in a different show. I believe that the UFC should reserve themselves for the best of the best. And if that means tampering or changing the way in which they... Tampering is a strong word. If that means readjusting the way in which they develop regionally, then so be it. I'm really okay with that. I'm quite okay with that. I'm not going to keep subjecting my opinions about what I like to what makes sense for being in some organization's front office. I think Bellator runs too many shows. I think they have way too many tournaments. Oh, well, they need to have these tournaments, they need to have these shows because it's a television product and Spike needs all that. I don't care. I'm a consumer. Yes? And I'm telling you, for my palate, MMA is extremely hard to do well. Extremely hard to do well. And when you get outside the guys who are very good at it, are a joy to even be around. But after them, it's a dramatic drop-off. And I don't think I should have to watch all that signal. Excuse me, I would like to keep it much more signal than have that much noise I have to go through to watch a show. And that's just my opinion as a consumer. It's a good question. It's one I don't know the answer to. Since UFC 159, Jon Jones has been having trouble with the majority of his MMA grappling, especially his takedowns. As a result of the current DC fight talks, I feel this issue is extremely relevant and may play a factor. There are many variables and contributing factors, but as a former high school wrestler, I must bring the toe injury into the overall discussion about Jones's diminished wrestling skills in the octagon. There was a noticeable limp at UFC 165 and UFC 172. Do you think the injury had physical or mental manifestations in his MMA grappling game? He might be afraid or in pain while putting pressure on and force on the injured toe. How may this affect his wrestling against DC? I'd love to hear your take on this during your live chat. Okay. It's a question I would love to see answered more thoroughly. I would like to see him. The big takeaway I got from the Glover fight was that Jones was a better fighter by a million miles, but and Jones did take him down. So Jones still has a I've taken down everyone I fought thing. But I said it on the post-fight show with Ariel and Chuck Mindenhall. People have caught up to his wrestling, and his wrestling used to be like, I mean, it's kind of crazy. He used to get that single leg, not even just cut behind the knee. He'd get it elbow deep on him, elbow deep on that single leg, or that the knee pick. And people are still getting out of it. That is kind of crazy. So I don't know. I don't know if it's the toe. I just haven't seen enough. You know, I know he went 5 rounds with Glover, but he didn't go 5 rounds in a way that was really wrestling intensive. I don't know. That's certainly something I dismissed early on, and now I'm not so ready to dismiss it. I think, if anything, people have really caught up with the wrestling of Jon Jones. Now, his wrestling defense is still very good, and we'll see what happens if he has to strike with Cormier, because Cormier is probably quicker, more explosive, but Jones has that reach and the much more creative striking next to it. So, I don't know. It's not an idle question. Wrestling and the creativity and the diversification of Jones's game was really sort of its linchpin. If you take away the wrestling, it's still pretty creative, but not like it is in other ways. That's rooting for 6 and Gracie. Can you do more impressions of the whining and crying guy from the Chocolate L Q&A? I'll bring that back at some point. Let's see. How do you rate Mendez's chances versus Aldo? You know what, man? I don't know. Everyone's like Ariel was picking Mendez, and that sort of surprised me. And I guess now that I think about it, I don't know that's that crazy. Maybe it's not that crazy. Maybe it's one of those things where I do believe that the Barao loss and the Dillashaw win provides a healthy boost of momentum. But in the end, is that really what you could say would cause a win or a loss? Like, well, that's really what's going to determine winning or losing. Well, no. In the end, it'll be their skills. I think the leg kicks and the takedown defense of Jose Aldo are hard to beat. The only thing I can see, though, is I do think he takes rounds off, and I do think he fades late. And if somehow Mendez can find a way to stay in that fight long and then put it on him late, something interesting could happen. In that context, yes. But I think the leg kick, takedown defense, 1-2 shot, quote-unquote, is just hard for Mendez to deal with. Hard for anybody to deal with. All right, I think we have to go. Is there a quick one on Twitter I can get to? Backstrom's bulldog choke and performance. What's your impression? Dude, beating a guy like Tom Nianamaki on short notice, no less, I believe, right? Didn't Nicholas Backstrom get, it was supposed to be somebody else? Whatever the case. And then having a name like one of the former, is Backstrom still playing for the Capitals? Whatever. I don't watch enough hockey. And then to get him in that Carlos Newton, Pat Miletich choke, oh my God, that is awesome. That was awesome, awesome stuff. So happy to see more from Nicholas Backstrom. Obviously training with Gustafsson has paid off dramatically. And to get a guy as savvy of a grappler as Tom Nianamaki is a big, big, big showing. You know, you could say it's not very technical because it's just one of those horsepower moves, but just having the presence of mind to pull it off and then sticking with it, it's impressive stuff. So a lot more I'm interested in seeing from Nicholas Backstrom. All right. With that in mind, do me a favor. Make sure everyone who you were watching this, share this somewhere. Share it on Reddit, Instagram, whatever. Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff. I appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at SBN Luke Thomas. You can email me at luke.thomas@sbnation.com. And we'll have plenty of coverage of this weekend's UFC Fight Night 42. All that good stuff. Predictions coming out. We'll have videos, all kinds of stuff. Stay tuned. Until next time, Buchecha, 3-time champion. Stay frosty.